All right, so let's get into the three main sources of noise in any building. I mean, the first one, it's pretty obvious, that's airborne noise. That's people making noise. Maybe they're in the next room watching TV or listening to music loudly or speaking loudly. Could be cars or airplanes outside and coming through your window, construction activity out in a neighboring property. That's all airborne noise. It's the noise that we can hear, and then it's getting through your walls or windows, or maybe your windows are even open, and they're coming into the area which you don't want that noise. And noise being unwanted sound, essentially. We talk about unwanted noise, but I think most noise is typically unwanted. And airborne noise is actually has the least amount of power. So it's generally easy to deal with, but it does take architectural solutions because you can't isolate airborne noise very easily. It's not coming from a single source generally, or one that you can control. So your problem there is that there's no way kind of to isolate airborne noise, but it doesn't have a whole lot of power because it's going through the air through compression waves, and those compression waves are what generate some vibration that gets into your structure, but it's fairly weak. And then the next main source is vibration-induced noise, and that's what we are going to be talking about today. Vibration-induced noise is when mechanical energy is injected into the structure itself, and that's usually with any kind of mechanical equipment or perhaps some electrical equipment that creates vibration, and you attach it to your structure. And as soon as you do that, that energy, there's no way for it to dissipate at the source because it's hard connected, and that energy will get into your building. That's the next very common source of noise, and that needs to be dealt with at the source. And it can be very problematic because it travels through buildings very well, and there's a lot more power going directly into the building compared to just regular acoustic noise, because that equipment's got, if it's a large piece of equipment, will have quite a bit of horsepower in it, and there's any offset in that rotation will create your vibration, and it can do it with a fair amount of power. That's why you want everything well balanced, and hopefully it doesn't create a lot of vibration, although some equipment just does by the nature of its design. And then lastly, we have impact noise. That is generally going to be footfall. You get this problem in a lot of apartment buildings and condo buildings, especially wood frame buildings, because people's heels come down and they hit the floor, and it can create quite a bit of impact, and you hear that clunking sound, that banging of footfall on the floor. And that's the most common one, although any kind of impact, people dropping things, shutting drawers and doors, things like that, are all impacts. And again, this can actually, even though the sound itself is brief, it has the most power because you're getting a lot of power just driven right into the structure upon impact. And so impact can be very difficult because it's also similar to airborne noise, generally hard to isolate at the source, because the source is, like airborne noise, quite often the source is people walking around. You can't isolate them necessarily without addressing the structure itself. So those are the three main sources, and like I said, I'm going to be focusing on vibration-induced noise today, and I'll look at airborne noise and impact noise in another video.